Hello. So, the printed parts have turned up now, and I can actually get on with doing the rest of the build. We've got the next step to do today, really. We've done the Z rails, now we just need to do the motors so we can actually move them up and move them down. That needed the printed parts, which I've been waiting for, but they've finally turned up, and they are beautiful. They are much better quality than I could have done on the printers behind me. Roll the intro, I'll show you them, and we'll get to building the rest of the motion for the Z-axis. Okay, quick disclaimer. These aren't all the printed parts. I might have accidentally deleted the footage and then built the rest of the printer. So this is what I've still got left to do. But yeah, have a look at these. Okay, so these are the printed parts. I've got them from JBD3D in the UK, and he's done an awesome job for me. My favourite ones have got to be the polycarbonate for the hot end. I mean, these look awesome, and hopefully going to help with any heat creep I get from it. And the little LED light bit, that's cool. The next part we need to do is all the motion for the Z-axis. You saw last time we got the rails fitted, and yeah, we've just got to put it all together, which should be pretty straightforward. Okay, so the first step I've got to do is get those heat set inserts in, which is where that tool I've made comes in really handy, as you will see in a second. Basically, you just get them lined up, push the heat tool down on them, and it melts them into place, just like this. So, still heating up here, but you get the idea. You just push it in, melts the plastic around it, creates a great bond. They're not going to go anywhere after that. We get a nice close-up of what's actually happening. So you'll see here it actually sinks down below the plastic and then expands itself back up. Next step is to create the pulleys. And these are going to be quite accurate, so yeah. This is where the calipers come in handy. I had to measure all of these perfectly and get them just right. Next step is bearings. Get all the bearings on there, the spacers. My fingers were very clumsy when I did this, so thankfully those tweezers came in handy. And then we've got a main drive shaft, which we need to line up the flat bit on that bar with one of the grub screws so it doesn't spin. And thread lock every single grub screw. You do not want one of those coming loose. They're tiny little screws. If it comes loose, you will probably never find it again. Although hopefully you'll notice issues before it fully falls out. Yeah, literally every screw needs some thread lock. Make sure they're nice and tight. They're not going anywhere. Make sure everything's up as tight as it can be to each other. Don't want any spaces here, otherwise all your line up doesn't work. 2 more bearings to hold the ends of the shafts. Then just repeat 4 times. Now, make sure when you put it in, the bearings are actually in the grooves and the shaft lines up like that. You don't want it sticking out one end more than the other. Next step, screw it all together. That holds everything in place and you're not going to go anywhere. And then the the fixing for the feet. Basically, the next step is just carry on putting the screws in, making sure everything's tight and everything moves freely. You don't want anything binding up. Basically, as long as it all moves freely, everything's going to line up properly, you're good to go. Now, I'll save you the pain of watching me do all 4 of these. Speed through this one, and then with the wonders of video editing, get the rest done. Now, those 3 holes there that you can see, they are for the feet. We'll get to that bit in a minute. But there you go, that's all 4 of them done. Each one of them moves freely, no binding, and I've remembered to put the belt on every single one. So, this is the plate that the rubber feet go onto. There's a captive nut in the back of this. That just takes an M5 bolt. I was a little bit worried about this because there's actually a hole directly behind that. But it held in well, screwed in no issues, and didn't fall off. There you go. Wonders of video editing. You don't have to watch me do it 4 times. I wish it had been that easy though. Okay, so the next thing we have to do is get the actual pulleys onto the motors. Once again, we're working with these teeny tiny set screws, so we need to make sure they have got thread locker on. There's also a printed tool, which I'll show you in a sec. When we put the set screws in there, we need to make sure one of them's lined up with the flat part on the motor. Just stops it spinning. Okay, so this is the little printed tool. Gets the pulley at just the right point away from the motor. So that means that when you put it into place on the printer, everything lines up right and you've not got belts running wonky. Make sure it doesn't drop down while you're doing it. Get your set screws into place and tighten them up. Make sure you put the thread locker on. You really don't want to be losing one of these or one of them coming loose. It will cause you hassle down the line. But yeah, once again, repeat it 4 times. Like I said, this got very, very repetitive doing this bit. Thankfully this next step went a bit quicker. So these are the mounting brackets to actually hold the motors onto the frame. Key thing to note here is the vertical part of the bracket needs to be lined up with the plug on the motor. That way when you do it, all the wires are actually heading into the printer as opposed to out of it, or up into the bed, or down to the floor. So I might have made a mistake with one of these, but thankfully I didn't catch it on camera, and you'll never see it. So yeah, that's all those 4 done. Next step is to actually get them mounted onto the frame. Now, this is pretty much how you mount everything to the frame. Some T-nuts, some bolts, line up the bolts to the T-nuts, and screw it down. So, get the actual pulley system we set up first, then fit the motor, and then there's this little lever which sets the tension on the belt. You don't want the belt to be too loose or too tight, and thankfully they've designed this so it perfectly does it. I'll speed through here of me just putting them on. Make sure you get the right size T-nuts first. I actually picked up the M3 ones first, which would have been a pain to get back out. Basically, stick them in. So, once we've got them in, the M5 bolts, make sure the hole in the T-nut lines up with the hole in the piece, and just tighten it down with the Allen key. Really is just like building Meccano, this printer. Once you've got the pulley on, you need to put the motor on. Once again, T-nuts and bolts. I thought this bit was going to be a lot more complicated, getting it lined up. But honestly, that little lever I'm putting in there, it really does work a treat. So this is a close-up of it. You can see how the belt's loose. The moment you move that lever, it tightens it up. So loose to tight. Then just tighten it down again. It's when you first put it on, you want to make sure those screws are loose so it can move. Well, here I am just checking that it's actually as tight as it can before I fully tighten them up. The final step in this part of the instructions is to build this angry looking robot thing. Which I can't see anything but an angry robot when I look at this picture. So this is actually the idler pulley for the top of the belt. So there is some tension adjustment to this, which is done by this captive nut and a bolt that goes all the way through it. So I've left these quite loose for now, but once we've got the belts on, we can correctly set the tension just by tightening this bolt up. So yeah, just thread through eventually and just tighten it up. I actually struggled with this because the nut moved in the back. I got it eventually, but then the next part was to actually put the pulley on itself. I wasn't too sure how this worked first, the instructions weren't very clear, but this actually just screws straight into the plastic. There's no nuts or anything, you just screw it straight in it and it's actually the plastic that holds it. So you want to be really careful that you don't over tighten that bit. Otherwise you'll just strip it straight out. There you go, there's a little angry robot face. Let's see, it kept catching and not quite grabbing. I got it there in the end. So once you've got all those built, once again there's 4. It's almost like everything goes on the 4 corners of the printer. So once you've got all them built, 1 on each corner of the printer, just using T-nuts again. And then you've got 4 little angry robots just hanging out. So that is pretty much it for this step now. The next part I've got to do is the bed, which I'm just going to do a short video for. There's not a great deal to do on that. And then we can start looking at the actual X and Y. Okay, so that's it for that stage. Hopefully you've watched to this point. If you have, please hit that like button, subscribe, all the usual stuff. I'm hoping there's not going to be too many more stages to go. I'm looking forward to getting the part about the wiring and everything. That is where it's going to start getting interesting, I think. At the moment, it is just building a Meccano set, let's be honest. So, yeah, hopefully we should be there soon. We've just got the X and the Y stuff to sort out, and the bed. And then we actually get onto the wiring and setting up, and hopefully the first print. Really can't wait for the first print. So, yeah. Like, subscribe, and catch you next time.